8. Historical paradigm of failed collective consciousness transition. In the long history of mankind, there have been many attempts at collective consciousness transition, from religious awakening, political revolution, to global connection driven by modern technology. Each collective transition is accompanied by the call of the ultimate proposition. Is it possible to cross the boundaries of individual cognition and complete the awakening of civilization in the true sense? However, when this transition lacks internal structural support, information coordination mechanism, and multidimensional perception fusion, the result is often catastrophic. The most typical example is the communist totalitarian experiment and Nazi national fanaticism in the 20th century. These two seemingly opposing systems are actually extreme manifestations of failed consciousness transition. We cannot simply understand it as anti-civilization barbarism, but as an immature attempt to try to cross civilization, which eventually fell into darkness and became the most severe warning to future civilization. The structural logic of consciousness transition. Consciousness transition is not a simple spread of ideas or social reform, but a reconstruction of the collective mental structure. It includes the following dimensions. 1. Alignment of information, structure. Cognitive synchronization requires the collective to have a consensus on the basic cognitive structure: life, existence, power, resources, etc. Without completing this step, any collective transition will be structurally blind. Point 2. Expanded perception field. Individual perception needs to transcend underlying patterns such as fear, defense, and projection. Otherwise, collective emotions will become the fuel that distorts the transition. Point 3. Integration and transformation of emotional energy. Emotional transmutation. Emotions are the carrier of transition, not the purpose. If not integrated, they will backfire on the system. 4. Redefinition of self-group, relationship, ego group, dialectic. If you cannot jump out of the binary opposition structure of I versus others, the transition will lead to alienation. The communist experiment, a tragedy of forced transition based on class consciousness. Starting point: the collective awakening of human equality consciousness. Marxism proposed historical materialism and production relations determine the superstructure, which triggered a large-scale class awakening in the 19th and 20th centuries. The communist utopian vision attempts to introduce the consciousness community structure into real society. Equality for allo, resource, Shiringo, free kingdom. After the end of history. Structural reasons for the failure of the transition. 1. Information asymmetry. The irrational homogeneity of the consciousness structure and the division of the social knowledge layer have caused an extreme cognitive gap between political high-level versus basic masses. Class cognition is simplified to enemy and me opposition, lacking multidimensional structural recognition. 2. Emotional integration. Hatred, oppression, and revenge emotions are directly used as driving forces, rather than converted community competition dynamics. 3. Forced assimilation. Mechanism. Forced consciousness unification, in the name of thought, transformation, spiritual criticism, and the cultural revolution are social symptoms of structural collapse. 4. Lack of self-awareness. The party represents the people and the people are the country, which leads to the system losing its correction mechanism. Final result: what should have been a highlight moment of awakening to the consciousness of freedom and equality has become a totalitarian machine. The original will of collective freedom has been suppressed by the structure into the reality of collective slavery. The whole society is trapped in institutional corruption, and the whole society has degenerated into the slave era, accompanied by large-scale power rent-seeking, and the violent repression derived from maintaining the rent-seeking system, as well as the consciousness, domestication, behavior of the whole society. Nazism, the black hole of group identity transitions. Starting point: the resonance of consciousness of national identity. After World War I, Germany fell into an economic and spiritual crisis. Hitler proposed the Aryan race superiority theory and tried to rebuild national identity with common ancestral memory. Attempted paths for consciousness transition. Establish cultural totems. Third Reich. Reconstruct historical narratives. Germanic mythology plus Jewish conspiracy theories. Resonance projection of the future Millennium Reich. Structural reasons for the failure of transition. 1. Single frequency consciousness resonance. Only Aryan blood can participate in the consciousness community, and the rest are excluded. 2. Perception closed system. Control information sources. Through propaganda, cleansing, and education to create closed cognitive loops. 3. Enemy creation mechanism. All system problems are attributed to others, especially Jews. This creates a self-defeating loop. Effect of the consciousness structure. 4. Power structure usurpation. The transition should have served the collective cognitive dimension upgrade, but it became a fanatical expansion of Hitler's personal will. Final result: the national collective consciousness has become a psychological engine for war and massacre, in the name of millennium glory. The seeds of tens of millions of deaths and civilizational faults have been sown. With the end of World War II, this consciousness transition for national salvation came to a complete end. Section for Why Are They All Failed Superconscious Transitions. Basic principles of metanosis. Definition: inner experience is the core, not external authority. Information resonance is the path, not one-way transmission. Multi-frequency coordination is the order, not forced unity. Failure mode analysis. Formula: consciousness transition failure is approximately equal to information resonance distortion multiplied by power structure usurpation multiplied by self-cognition blind spot. Both tried to skip the structural integration stage and directly implement consciousness transition. Its path design lacks a self-organizing feedback mechanism, which eventually leads to system out of control. Section 5. Future warning. How to avoid pseudo-transition. 1. Transition is a gradual emergence, not an indoctrination. Awakening cannot be achieved through preaching or violence. It is a result of internal evolution and information emergence. 2. Do not construct enemies, but integrate boundaries. The true transition path is to make opposing consciousnesses communicate with each other, rather than destroying others. 3. Do not skip the intermediate structure emotion-knowledge belief. All transitions must rely on a complete internal process. Perception gives, integration gives, reflection gives improvement. 4. Do not pursue ultimate unity, but respect the coexistence of multiple frequencies. The true consciousness transition is a dynamic network, not an ultimate standard. Section 6. Transition model of superconscious. Civilization 1. Ice-breaking awareness. Through individuals, we can generate preliminary observations of the structure of consciousness, avoid religious tendencies and idealization, and establish an independently constructed belief system. 2. Perception reconstruction. Through emotions and experience reaction, we can avoid emotional overload and transform emotions into driving action. 3. Information alignment. Access an open consensus recording system to avoid the formation of a consensus closed loop. We can collaborate and create without unified cognition. 4. Multi-frequency resonance. Resonate with others to form a synergistic frequency band. Avoid excessive group identity and produce spillover effects. Accommodate differences and move forward. 5. Self-transition. Redefine the self-structure and consciousness becomes the subject. Eliminate the Superman complex and regard all consciousness as a mirror of resonance. Conclusion. The memory of failure is the starting point of transition. The failure of communism and Nazism has not erased the possibility of the collective consciousness of mankind. Instead, it has lit up the red lights and potholes on the path ahead. They prove that awakening consciousness without structure is a self-destructive dream, and only the synchronization of consciousness under the trio of structural perception, information integration and self-coordination can bring about a new collective civilization in the true sense. This time, please let us walk more soberly and freely.